This episode has been brought to you in part by the Azrieli Music Prizes, celebrating 10 years of promoting excellence in music composition. Come experience the musical imaginations of AMP's 4 extraordinary 2024 laureates. The Orchestre Symphonique de Montreal Chorus and Maestro Andrew McGill give the world premiere of their prize-winning works for the AMP Gala concert on October 28th at Maison Symphonique in Montreal. Learn more at azrielifoundation.org/AMP.
עמית בן עבדיה.
ירדן בוסקיר.
Matthias Ernest Bollstein.
That's what it sounded like Monday night in Toronto at the opening of the UJA Federation's Community Memorial Ceremony, marking 1 year since October 7th. A recorded loop played with the names of the more than 1,200 victims murdered by Hamas that day and since, including hostages. The names had been pre-recorded by the Israeli Shinshinim, teenagers who are here in Toronto doing their 1 year of community service before heading back home to Israel and straight into the army. A powerful way to begin the ceremony for the estimated 20,000 people who turned out to the solemn Toronto event, held outdoors in the Prosserman Jewish Community Centre's parking lot. No Canadian politicians spoke that night, although plenty were on hand, provincial, municipal, and federal. Instead, they left it to Israel's Consul General for Toronto and Western Canada, Idit Shamir, who got political, slamming world leaders for their cowardice, but reminding the crowd of the Jewish people's resilience.
We've seen this movie before. We know the ending. We remember every pogrom, every inquisition, every yellow star. Our response? Never again. Not empty words, a promise. We keep our promises. Every rocket from Gaza, every threat in Toronto, one target, Jews. We carry this pain. It doesn't break us, it steals us. World, wake up. This is your war too. Today us, tomorrow you.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Wednesday, October the 9th, 2024. Welcome to the CJN Daily, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News and made possible in part by the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation.
This is an audition to be a cantor.
But I don't want to be a cantor.
I wasn't raised with any religion. You're Jewish, though.
I welcomed Sam into my community by first taking his foreskin and next showing him the beautiful Twister bagel.
Culturally Jewish is the only podcast covering the weird, wide world of independent Canadian Jewish art.
Listen to Culturally Jewish at the cjn.ca/culture or wherever you get your podcasts.
Many people in Toronto wiped away tears as they stood in the crowd and recited the Kaddish, the mourner's prayer, and watched videos of the horrific scenes from October 7th, when tributes played on the giant screens that showed the larger-than-life faces of the 8 Canadians who were murdered. It was a similar scene in Montreal.
This close relationship means that the atrocities in Israel strike very close to home, piercing our hearts and souls.
That was Steve Sibag, chair of Montreal's Jewish community, speaking to nearly 8,000 people gathered in Hampstead Park for their vigil.
Among the murdered were 8 Canadians who we remember tonight with love and respect. Judy Weinstein Hagai, 74, grew up in Toronto, a talented writer, artist, educator, caregiver, volunteer, and peace activist. Killed at her home in Kibbutz Nir Oz, alongside her husband, Gadi. Vivian Silver, 74, of Winnipeg, a renowned peace and women's rights activist who helped children in Gaza access medical care in Israel. She dedicated her life to peace building and social justice. Her remains were found near her home in Kibbutz Be'eri. Tiferet Lapidot, 23, an Israeli citizen with family ties to Canada who taught school children in Africa and dreamed of traveling the world. She was cowardly murdered at the Nova Music Festival. Shir Chana Georgi, 22, an Israeli Canadian brimming with happiness and optimism, who loves sunset, singing, and dancing, also murdered at the Nova Festival near Kibbutz Re'im. Adi Vital Kaplun, 33, a dual citizen with extended family near Ottawa, a talented dancer, saxophonist, and basketball player with a master's degree in engineering. She ensured her father, husband, and the 2 young children were safe before being killed by Hamas terrorists at Kibbutz Holit. Ben Menashe Mizrahi, 22, from Vancouver, who immigrated to Israel alone at 18 to serve in the IDF as a lone soldier. He had just completed his military duty and was about to start university when he was killed at the music festival. Neta Epstein, 22, of Montreal, who worked with special needs youth and had recently returned home after his military service. His bravery saved the life of his fiancée Irene when he jumped on a grenade thrown by terrorists in the safe room of their home in Kibbutz Kfar Aza. Finalement, Alexandre Luc, 33 ans de Côte-Saint-Luc, une présence plus grande que nature et doté d'un charisme et d'une générosité hors pair. He died a hero on October 7th, standing at the entrance of a bomb shelter at Kibbutz Be'eri after fleeing the festival with friends. In an act of courage that is already becoming legendary, he used his body as a shield to protect those friends and strangers alike. Baruch Dayan Haemet, as the father of Hirsch Goldberg Poland said at his son's funeral, may their memory be a revolution.
Among the speakers, the mother of Alexandre Luc, Raquel.
This past year, as horrific as it has been for our family, it has given us a chance to see the best and the worst of humanity. We all know the worst. Some of the best was actually this morning when I was invited to speak at Bialik's memorial for October 7th. And looking out those beautiful young faces, the light shone so bright from them, and for so many teenagers to be so quiet, they fully understood what this day meant. And I thank them for being the ones that will have to sadly bear witness and tell their children and their grandchildren all about October 7th, what happened to us from the very next day, how there was a kid from Côte Saint-Luc that showed amazing heroism, and it got really bad for a while. But as usual, we are resilient, we fought back, we came together, and we came out stronger than ever.
In Vancouver's Sharet Tzedek Synagogue Sanctuary, 1,500 people filled the room. The lights were dimmed for the singing of Israel's national anthem, Hatikva, and people held up those white, small, battery-powered tea lights, while cellist Eric Wilson provided the melody. The event was for those in Israel, but locally, too, to reclaim the space in the same Jewish place of worship that just 4 months ago had its ornate front doors set on fire by an unknown attacker who police are still looking for. BC Premier Dave Eby was there, so was Conservative leader John Rustad and a local member of Parliament, but they didn't speak. Instead, Eby issued his message of solidarity for October 7th earlier in the day from the campaign trail ahead of next week's provincial election. Meanwhile, Vancouver's Ruti Mizrahi has stopped attending the weekly Bring Them Home rallies in her city. After October 7th last year, the Israeli-Canadian preschool teacher hung blue and white lights outside her front door and vowed not to turn them off until the hostages are freed, including her 85-year-old uncle Oded Lifshitz. He's a retired journalist who was kidnapped from Kibbutz Nir Oz, along with his 83-year-old photographer wife Yocheved. The aunt was freed 17 days later. She'd been beaten with sticks and separated from her husband and put down in the tunnels. The couple were peace activists who used to drive Palestinians from Gaza back and forth to medical appointments inside Israel. For their Canadian-based niece, October 7th changed her forever.
I kind of lost my happiness. Usually I'm a very happy and positive and optimistic person. And these days, I can't find it anymore. Seeing my country shattered to pieces and burned, and listing everybody, yeah.
And really reach out to one another, see if we, support each other.
In Saskatoon, Joseph Sequeira organized a rally for members of the Jewish community. It was held at City Hall on the day before October 7th. As a Jewish student who's now on the executive of that city's BBYO youth group, he brought together Jews and non-Jews, including a Christian couple who run the local Salvation Army, as allies. Here's Sequeira's message.
I'm not Israeli. I've never been to Israel. It hasn't affected me that much, honestly, but something that has affected me it's affected me in my relationships between other classmates saying things about Israel and saying things because I'm Zionist. It's affected my relationships with myself between Israelis, myself between other Jews who have been more affected, who might know people in Israel, in Gaza. And it's really changed all of our lives. Even if we know nobody who lives in Israel, even if we don't know any of the hostages, even if we've never been to Israel before, this stupid war, these terrorists have changed all of our lives, and they've turned the entire world upside down and affected all of us. And we need to get back to the way things were. I'm Israel High.
Joel Sack of Thornhill knows what it's like to be a statistic. Since October 7th, Jews accounted for 70% of all police-reported hate crime incidents, according to Statistics Canada last year. Recently, the 88-year-old pensioner was at a pro-Israel rally in Toronto when he was accosted by two people who drove up in their car, stole his Israeli flag out of his arms, then one of them picked him up and threw him to the road. Sack was bruised and cut and had to be taken to hospital, but it was the psychological trauma of what happened to him that still lingers. Being at the October 7th vigil Monday night is part of Sack's healing.
This helps. To be part of this thriving community is so encouraging. The support that I get, it just does wonders for me.
People have told me that October 7th made them reconnect with the community, remotivate them to become part of the Jewish, even go to shul or do organization marches that they never did for the last 20 years. Have you seen evidence of that in your life too?
Absolutely, absolutely. I have always been connected with the Jewish community, but now even more so. And I've increased my attendance at shul. I'm doing the Meals on Wheels, I'm attending events, and it's all positive and all highly beneficial. I'm a different person.
Vancouver's Mayor Ken Sim attended that city's October 7th event, but neither the Mayor of Montreal, Valérie Plante, nor Toronto's Mayor, Olivia Chow, turned up at theirs. Vaughan Mayor Stephen Del Duca did, but event organizers say they sent Chow's office 3 emailed invitations and followed up. They now allege the mayor's office has unsubscribed to their emails months ago. The mayor's office did not reply with an explanation. Ontario's Premier Doug Ford attended the Toronto event and wore a yellow ribbon on his coat, and he brought nearly a dozen cabinet ministers and Ontario caucus members with him. Although none spoke, but Ford did talk to reporters before the event began. What would you say to the Jewish community now on October 7th?
Well, first of all, our prayers and thoughts are with the people that have lost loved ones, over 1,200 people, and the hostages too that they've taken. We need them returned, and it's absolutely disgusting what happened on October 7th. We have zero tolerance for antisemitism. And Hamas is nothing but a terrorist organization that needs to be taken down.
What does it mean for you to be here personally, to take part in this?
Well, I love the community. All of a sudden one day they woke up on October 7th and they were being invaded by a bunch of terrorists, killing people, innocent people on top of that. War is one thing when you have two militaries, but going after innocent women and children and elderly people, it's disgusting. And we're stand behind the community, Jewish community, and we'll never waver. We want to make sure those hostages come back home to their families, and then we'll hold the rest accountable. But thank you.
What about bubble legislation to protect the Jewish synagogues and schools and things? No?
We'll be dealing with it.
You're going to be dealing with it? Okay, thanks.
I understand there is agreement to observe a moment of silence in memory of the victims of the attack in Israel that happened a year ago. I now invite...
The October 7th anniversary was a chance for federal politicians to express their solidarity with the victims and support Canada's Jewish community. And in the House of Commons on Monday, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre demanded answers from the federal Liberals and demanded condemnation of the antisemitism in the streets here. The Prime Minister wasn't in the House at the time, and so it fell to Foreign Minister Mélanie Joly to reply, which she did by deflecting and instead gave a roll call of the Canadians killed on October 7th.
A year ago today, a sadistic and genocidal death cult, Hamas, carried out the biggest attack on Jews since the Holocaust and has 100 more hostages. Bring them home. Here at home, though, our Jewish friends and neighbors have been doubly victimized as anti-Semitic mobs take to the streets shouting, "From Palestine to Lebanon, Israel will soon be gone. There's only one solution: intifada, revolution." Will the government clearly and unequivocally condemn these genocidal chants from hateful mobs on our streets?
Yeah.
The Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, Judy Weinstein, Vivian Silver, Ben Mizrachi, Netta Epstein, Shir Georgi, Alexandre Luc, Idal Vital Kaploun, Tiferet Lapido. May their memories be a blessing. It was my honor to have met with their families here at home and in Israel. And on the anniversaries of Hamas' horrific attacks, my promise to their loved ones is the following. Year after year, Canadians will honor their memories, and to Jewish people, we stand with you. We won't relent until the last hostage returns home.
A little later during question period, they were at it again.
I gave the Foreign Affairs Minister 2 opportunities to condemn the increasingly common and terrifying anti-Semitic chants we hear in the streets. Israel will soon be gone. There is only one solution: intifada, revolution. Twice she refused to condemn those remarks. She continues to pander to Hamas supporters in the Liberal Party as part of her leadership campaign rather than doing her job. So I'll give her another chance. Will she publicly support Israel's right to retaliate against the tyrants of Tehran and the terrorists in Hezbollah and Hamas to protect itself? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, if there's a day where we don't do politics about people's lives being taken or people being killed, it's today. We are all against any form of anti-Semitism, I hope, in this House, any form of discrimination. And I really hope that my colleague in front will apologize.
Poilievre's attacks on Mélanie Joly, including saying that she sides with Hamas supporters in her own party, earned him a one-day ban from the Speaker of the House of Commons for using unparliamentary language. The ban ends on October 9th. Meanwhile, Poilievre and the Prime Minister both attended Ottawa's Jewish community's official October 7th ceremony on Monday night at the city's Infinity Conference Centre. Trudeau spoke.
Almost 80 years since we collectively said, never again. Terrorist organizations like Hamas, like Hezbollah, like the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, still seek to harm Jews just because they are Jews. That's not being a freedom fighter. It's terrorism. Vile, anti-Semitic terrorism. And it makes me sick to my stomach. But the trauma of that day did not end on October 8th. What makes this barbaric attack that much more agonizing is the fact that you are reliving this nightmare every single day. You relive it when cowards shoot and smash the windows of your schools and synagogues in the middle of the night. You relive it when anti-Semites wave the flags of Hamas and Hezbollah in the streets of our cities. You relive it when too many of our fellow Canadians downplay or dismiss your pain, telling you that the generational trauma you carry and the anti-Semitism you experience somehow isn't real. You relive it when the term Zionist is tossed around as a profanity, a label for something other than what it truly means, believing in the right of Jewish people, like all people, to determine their own future, a right this government supports and always will. No one in Canada should ever be afraid to proudly call themselves a Zionist.
Later, speaking only in French, Trudeau pledged to increase the humanitarian funding that Canada is sending to help hundreds of thousands of suffering Gazans, and also calling for a ceasefire.
To my fellow Jews, stay united, stand tall, show pride, fight back, not just for Israel, for yourself.
Back in Toronto, it was remarkable to me how much security was deployed to keep the event safe. Concrete barriers up and down Bathurst Street, police SWAT teams and folks carrying very large machine guns, police helicopters overhead, private security guards stationed every few meters. As the Prime Minister noted, it was telling that organizers in Ottawa and elsewhere now keep the locations for these big events secret until the very last moment. And although there were other anti-Israel and pro-Palestinian protests going on across the country at the same time that day, none were held near the Toronto event. I remember the first time the Toronto Jewish community put on an event just 2 days after October 7th. That was an emergency rally on October the 9th, 2023. I'd actually been afraid to attend, but we went by subway, although I carried my large Israeli flag hidden in my purse until we passed by the blockade of chanting anti-Israel protesters near Melasman Square and we got safely inside the police cordon. This one felt different. It wasn't shock and fear. This time it was grief, but grief that has been forged over a year into courage and into a show of defiance, as the Consul General said. I haven't been hiding my outwardly Jewish symbols for quite a while now. Instead, I proudly donned my hostage dog tag necklace, I slipped on my beaded bracelet spelling out the letters Israel, and I eagerly added 2 blue plastic Am Yisrael Chai wristbands that they were giving out once we walked through the metal detectors. This time, though, I wasn't just part of the large audience. I was honored to have been asked to represent the Canadian Jewish News on stage, one of dozens of community leaders who'd been invited to form a makeshift choir to kick off the evening, leading the crowd in the singing of O Canada. Now, you might think that would have been nerve-wracking, but it felt really good to be there together. Jews and non-Jewish allies, it felt really empowering, invigorating. As we left, I noticed people were placing their small electric tea lights on top of the wooden posts on the sidewalk fence and adding their handheld paper Israeli flags there too, as a temporary memorial path maybe, but it also felt like a runway all the way up the hill, like a continuing flow of Jewish pride and peace just for a little while longer. And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of the CJN Daily. Sponsored in part with the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. The CJN Daily is produced by Zachary Judah Kaufman. Our executive producer is Michael Freeman, and our music is by Dov Beck-Levine. Feel free to share your October 7th commemoration experiences with us. We're at ebessner@thecjn.ca. Thanks for listening.